have chosen to join us today, whether you're here in the sanctuary or joining us virtually over Zoom, or even if you're watching this late at a later date on our YouTube channel, where the recording of our services gets posted every Monday evening. Now, let us prepare our minds and open our hearts as we hear our prelude for this morning.
Good morning. I'm playing 3 preludes by Alexander Scriabin, who was a composer who had synesthesia. Sounds and colors were the same thing to him. He would see colors. And I'm playing number 5, 13, and 21.
all the gifts that you bring to this community. Let's see. Announcements. Are there any announcements today? Eleanor?
Good morning. In January, we are having our auction again. Yay! And the theme is back in the swing because we're back in the 20s. It's just a different 20s. Last week, we saw the slideshow of all the different kinds of events that have been going on at Summit for the last many years. And a lot of them were pictures from auction fun, of gatherings of things people put together. So we would like those of you who would like to donate offerings to bring our community back together again. And if you're in the sanctuary, there's donation forms in your order of service. If you're online, there's a link to a Google Doc form that's in the virtual order of service. Please fill these out and get them back to us by mid-December so we can get the catalog together. The live auction will be in the sanctuary on January 21st, which will be great fun. And we will have virtual bidding online the week before. And we'll probably do some that weekend as well. So stay tuned for more information. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. On behalf of Andy Mitchell and the the Social Justice and Action Committee, I'm here to report that the Giving Tree is coming back, and it's been a Summit tradition to adopt a family in need for the holiday season. This year, we will be partnering again with Crisis House. We've adopted a family of 4, and Crisis House has asked for donations of gift cards so that the families may purchase gifts and a holiday meal of their choice. Whether you are attending services in person or on Zoom, you can participate. You can bring in a gift card for $5, $10, or $20 or more and place it in one of the wrap boxes that will be here next Sunday after the holidays. Target and Walmart cards are preferred, or you may use the donate button on the website. Be sure to use the drop-down menu to select Social Justice in Action, and your donation will be used towards the purchase of gift cards. December 4th will be the last day for donations. Thank you all for joining in this, making this holiday season brighter for a local family. Thank you.
Any other announcements? Did you want to announce about the Thanksgiving potluck, or shall I just mention the Thanksgiving potluck is yeah, you want to come up and speak into the mic? Oh, masked one.
Well, it's not too late to sign up. We'll be hosting the Thanksgiving potluck here on Thanksgiving, of course, starting around 12:30. If you want to help us set up, it's started at 11:30. We'll have some games and a craft table for activities and conversation, and then start the feast around 1:30.
We already have signups for a really nice traditional Thanksgiving meal. Thanks for everyone that signed up and bringing your favorite recipes. We're looking forward to getting together.
Thank you. We want to acknowledge that our fellowship resides on unceded Kumeyaay land, and that for more than 10,000 years, this land has been and continues to be home to the Kumeyaay people. We recognize the violent history of the colonization of California and honor the continuing presence of the Kumeyaay Nation. Now we have the chalice lighting.
Here we have come into this sacred space, quieter now with our readiness for connection, for communion, for healing, for wholeness. Let us be willing, however, we are changed.
Down again. Now we'll sing Are You hymn. Are the words in Spanish first and then in English? Please stand. May love be the spirit of this fellowship. May the quest for truth be its sacrament and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. Today's reading is by Margot, is written and will be read by Margot Mariana.
Good morning. This is the honoring for all we are going through and for the theme today. We call it appetites. Taste colors of the fields, the flowers, the rocks and brush. Rush of air as you swallow wipes away all sound. Filaments of breeze weave into your breathing, leaving the currents of the mind, the bundles of words to sink in their own gravity, into the velvet flow of silence that brushes new lining into your body. The color of your blood is changing. You lengthen across the rust gray boulder into the spills of sunlight, soak in the crystal veins, and still to hear through the brook bubbles flight, the stone's gasp of wonder at the new shapes you are becoming. Thank you.
All right. Time for all ages with Mary Card.
Good morning. I have props. I have props a lot of times. So my name is Mary Carter Vale, and many of you know, I serve as your Director of Religious Exploration. And today I want to talk to you about the Kumeyaay people. So I don't know about you, but when I went to elementary school, it was the week before Thanksgiving, we had this lovely little fairy tale that we told about the Indians and the pilgrims, and they had this wonderful little meal, and we make paper hats with feathers and paper hats with like pilgrim helmets, pilgrim hats and all that kind of stuff. And it was kind of this feel-good thing, but it was all a fairy tale, right? The Thanksgiving story was created after the Civil War by President Lincoln, not necessarily the story, but the myth, if you will. And it was a way of getting folks together in this country, trying to encourage families to come back together after the destructive experience of the Civil War. So this was the story that was told. There's way more detail to that. I'm very much simplifying this. And for me, I wanted to understand more about the community, the indigenous people, and the land where I happen to reside. I wanted to understand more about the Kumeyaay people who we have taken as a colonizing community has taken over the land that they cared for. Did you know that the Kumeyaay were here? I know we said our land acknowledgement 10,000 years, but it might be as much as 12,000 years that the people the indigenous people have been on this land. Now think about that, 12,000 years. That's before the pyramids were built. We know more about the Egyptians than we've been taught about the Kumeyaay people, because it's just not taught. It's not taught. It hasn't been taught, at least it wasn't taught to my generation. Now, my children and the children that I've worked with here at Summit know a lot more because they're learning more in school. But it's still bits and pieces, and you have to go look for it unless you go and visit, unless you go be in relationship, right? So the Kumeyaay people moved all around this land, and I have a map. Can you put the map for me, Dan? Dan's working on it for me. I have a map so you can see the land that the many tribes, the many communities that now call themselves the Kumeyaay were in. So this is a map from 1769, that gray piece. That was the territory that all these tribes occupied in 1769. And in 2000, you can see the names, and this is a more contemporary map. This is from the Southern California Tribal Chairmen's Association. There are 18 different tribal communities in San Diego, 18 different reservations, 18 different reservations. Our county has the most indigenous reservations of any county in the United States. And the Kumeyaay people are living on the land they've ancestrally lived on. They weren't driven away, still here. And they are working, they have a beautiful culture, beautiful stories, and they're working to save their beautiful language. I went and visited the Barona Museum, and I highly recommend that, going to the Barona Museum. They have a wonderful Barona Cultural Museum. It's past the casino as you're heading north on Wildcat Canyon. It's free. And they shared the story of their culture and how one of the things that was the most devastating was the loss of language. Now think about that for a minute. What would that feel like to lose your language? To not be able to tell the stories of your people? The language is such an important part of culture. And for the missionaries to come in and say, hey, we're just going to convert you to our faith. That wasn't what happened. When you lose your language, when you lose your culture, all the identity is wrapped up in these beautiful stories that are part of who our neighbors are. So we do our land acknowledgement, right? And the Kumeyaay have asked, if you're going to do a land acknowledgement, we want you to be in right relationship with us. It's not just a box to tick off, right? Not just a box to tick. How are we in right relationship? How are we connected to the folks who've lived on this land? Now, one of the ways that they are really, really working hard, and this is just an amazing story, I think, is to hold on to their language. There's two languages in the Kumeyaay. There's two dialects in the Kumeyaay language. Iapay, which is the northern dialect, which is spoken in the northern part of the territory, and Tiapay, which is spoken in the southern part. And I don't know if you've noticed how their territory has been cut in half by two countries dividing it up, Mexico and the United States. And there's a border wall there now. So how are you supposed to communicate with your neighbors, with your family, when there's a wall between you? So that's one of the reasons that these dialects are even developing more, because they're separated. So I went and visited the Barona Cultural Museum, and I also went to the Iapay park at Old Town. They built this really neat park. And I talked to you about it last week about going there after the service. I went there Sunday after the service. The parking was dreadful. So I invite any of you to go and visit at any time. I'm going to discourage us all going after service today because Sunday parking over there is really difficult. But if anybody wants to go, I'd be happy to go with you. But the cool thing about this park is it's a self-guided walk around, and they have on the ground these discs with pictures of animals and plants and areas that were important to their culture, that are important to their current culture, along with the current language. what word is used for that animal? Like an owl. The word for the owl is ooh, ooh. That is the indigenous word for the owl, right? It's a beautiful, I thought it was very cool. I could remember that one. And it's really fun to go walk around and look. So I highly encourage you to go walk around as one place of like introducing yourself to this beautiful culture. Now, the Kumeyaay people, they would move. They would live by the water during certain times of the year and move inland and go up into the mountains. They were also farmers, they were ranchers, and they still are, and they're still here. And they're scientists, and they're historians, and they're teachers, and all the things in contemporary world. So how are we in relationship with them? Mark has been working to restore our peace pole. It kind of needed a little rework. And he talked to Nancy Deweese, who has a friend who speaks Kumeyaay, or a friend of a friend, and asked what the peace pole says: may peace prevail on earth, right? And we have it in different languages on the pole. So what would the language of the local people be on that pole? What would the language of the indigenous people be on that pole? So Nancy's friend said, and this is pronounced mut kapet ahan. I went to the Barona Museum and learned how to say it. So mat is pronounced mut. And when I was there, this translates to land, cover, good. May peace prevail on earth. Land, cover, good. May the land be covered with good. The languages don't translate exactly. The English language, as many of you may know, is a very difficult language to translate with other languages. So when I spoke to, made friends with a woman named Mandy at the Barona Museum, and I shared this with her, and her father happened to be one of the top linguists of the Kumeyaay language. So I asked, would it be okay to ask your father about this? And this is a decent translation. He also had another one for us. And I wrote this one down. Etu mutvi hawa. So mutvi means the land. Pawa is here. And etu means at peace. So at peace, the land here. So we have two different translations, both absolutely beautiful. Maybe we need two on our peace pole, they both are beautiful. And when I told Mandy we were doing this, she got very excited, because having their language in different places, having this important language in different places, is part of keeping it alive, part of living. It's part of us knowing these 6 words helps to keep it alive, right? Even though they may not be words we use every day, we're helping to keep that language alive. So what I'd like to do is encourage us to be more in relationship. The Barona Museum has offered for us to arrange a time when we can go out and visit as a community. And I'm going to also be engaging with them and talking to them about maybe when we dedicate our peace pole, to see if anybody from that community is willing to come here and be part of that. Us going there and being relationship. Them coming here and being relationship. It's a two-way street of building community, just like each of you built a community when you came here and met somebody. We're meeting new folk. So I encourage you this week, as we're thinking about Thanksgiving and the myths that we've been taught, to sort of engage. Go to the many tribes in San Diego have wonderful websites with history and more information, videos of the bird dancers, and the traditional different wonderful ways that they experience their culture that they're willing to share, and ways that we can just witness. And I encourage you to go this week. Take this week as an opportunity to learn more about your neighbors. So that's my story for you this Sunday. And we are going to be engaging in some games in the back that come from that community. So thank you for listening. And I'm going to head off with doing the UU, our family affirmation. So join me if you know it. We are Unitarian Universalists, a people of open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. And now I believe we have a song, so. Thank you for listening.
First, I'm going to ad lib a little. This always reminds me of a cartoon strip I cut out years ago. I mean, really a long time ago, and I still have it. But it shows the long table and the pilgrims all sitting around the table, and this one Native American man is sitting at the end of the table, and it says, "How come I always get the neck?" Well, still funny to me. Anyway. Okay, now we're going to do a hymn in the Teal hymnal, number 1009, a meditation on breathing. This is the one that Frank used to do quite frequently, where we divide into three groups and it's like a round. But we don't have many people in the sanctuary, so and it always seemed a little awkward to me, but never mind. And so we're going to divide into two, and we'll just do 2 parts instead of 3. So are you gonna help me? I mean, give me a note or something and
Why don't we start with the easiest part, which is the drone, and that's
breathe in, breathe out.
breathe out. That sounds C. So you
On
can
C, okay.
Try that.
So that's high. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, and whatever key you can do it. That's a little high for me, but breathe out. And the second part is when I breathe in, when I breathe in with peace, when I breathe out, I'll breathe out loud. In, I'll breathe in peace, when I breathe out, I'll breathe out loud. So we'll have this side be the drone side, and this side be the second side, because there's fewer people over here. So this side will go, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, I'll breathe in peace, breathe out, I'll breathe out love, breathe in, I'll breathe in peace, when I breathe out, I'll breathe out love, when I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace, when I breathe out, I'll breathe out love, when I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace, when I breathe in, I'll breathe out love. One more time. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. Not too bad. Okay. Your Sunday morning offering is a gift that provides Summit UU Fellowship a way to keep building a better world together. The smallest gift is welcome. For those of you on Zoom, clicking the link can be found in the chat box. And please select the Sunday plate option in order to allocate your donation to the Sunday plate. Now we'll have our offertory.
I will play 2 pieces by Alan Ovanes, who explored world musics, and these reflect both the Eastern sort of traditions of Japan and China. And the evening bell is, you can hear the bell and the bass, and it's kind of a mysterious meditation on sound. And then the second piece is a ghazal, which is a Persian love poetry that Rumi had written, and it's featured a solo voice and then a kind of very interesting scalar accompaniment. So Alan Hovanes, Visionary Landscapes.
Karen. We are delighted to welcome Peter Bolland to our pulpit today. Peter Bolland is a professor of philosophy and humanities and department chair at Southwestern College. He received his BA in religious studies from UC Santa Barbara and an MA in philosophy from San Diego State University. In addition to his college commitments, he lectures in a wide variety of venues on philosophical, spiritual, and mythological subjects. His talks through Oasis and Osher are typically sold out, and he has participated in services and workshops and retreats at several UU congregations. Please welcome Peter Bolland.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. I appreciate that. Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Do we have this thing working here? All right, good. I'll move this back a little bit. Well, this is my 7th time being here, and it's just in the last year or so, and I practically work here now. It's great. I know, I'm so thrilled to be back. This is a familiar place to me and a beautiful community, and I get the opportunity to travel around a lot. I got my own church that Lori and my wife and I go to, but I speak at a lot of places like this, not just UU, but CSLs and Unities and all those liberal progressive Christian churches like University Church of Christ and all the UCCs. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of great communities of people scattered all over San Diego and all over the world, really deeply aligned with what y'all do here. And if you ever feel alone, trust me, you're not. And even outside the UU family, there's a lot of great people doing a lot of great work. But I have to add this: nobody is doing music like Karen does here. And it is remarkable. And I want to just really acknowledge not only your artistry, Karen, but all the things that people don't see. The hours and hours and hours that go into curating the music that she brings here to you means that she spends a lot of time listening, researching, playing, discarding 90% of it, and bringing 10% of it here for these brief moments that she gets to play here. So nobody else in town or anywhere is doing anything like this. So thank you for that. And we already clapped, and that's one. That's all you get is that one applause. But thank you so much. It's a thrill for me to be here. It's really something special going on. So our theme this month, I'm told, is change. And so today I want to share with you some meditations on impermanence. And I particularly want to search with you for the gifts that impermanence might be trying to give us. And so let me start here. Just a few days ago, in fact, last Friday on Veterans Day, I had the opportunity to drive up to Julian to visit a new friend of mine, the author Richard Louv, who wrote Last Child in the Woods and Our Wild Calling. I bet more than a few of you are familiar with his amazing, groundbreaking work. But he said, hey, why don't you meet me at a place called Regulars, that coffee place right in Julian. And I said, sure. Now, when you're driving to meet someone for coffee that's an hour away, you don't exactly know when to leave the house. You know, my Google says it's 32 miles from my house to the cafe called Regulars in Julian, but it said it took an hour. So I'm like, something's going to happen, you know, I'll leave 90 minutes. So anyway, I was ridiculously early. And because I was so early, I pulled over to the side of the road right there in the heart of Cuyamaca Rancho State Park. You know the place. It's this big meadow. Before you get to Stonewall Peak, before you go up that crazy switchback to Stonewall Peak, and way before Lake Cuyamaca. So you just get into Rancho Cuyamaca State Park, and there's that big meadow. And I just pulled over to the road there, and I just walked out into the meadow. And a stone's throw from the road, behind a copse of trees and shrubs, there was a gathering of those boulders. You know what I mean, boulders that are sort of flat. And I'm like, there's going to be a mortero here. And sure enough, as I kind of walked through the grass over to this area, there was mortero. Some people call them metates. You know, metates tend to be rectangular. These are grinding spots where the kumai took the acorns from all the oak trees around there, soaked them, ground them to make cakes and porridge. Great protein, great food source. And I just sat there on those boulders near that metate in the silence. And it was a beautiful day. It was cold. I had my down jacket on, but because of the recent rains, all the grass had turned green. It looked like Ireland up there. Usually this time of year, it's just gold, right? And it was stunning. And there were these perfect couple of little clouds in the sky. And I could almost hear the great grandmothers and the grandmothers and the mothers and the daughters and the granddaughters and the great granddaughters all gathered there, sharing wisdom, singing songs, sharing village gossip. And it was one of those, what the Celts call a thin place. In Celtic lore, the idea of the thin place is a place where the two worlds suddenly appear to each other, where the infinite world touches the temporal world, where the sacred touches the profane. It was just remarkable. It was remarkable in its unremarkableness, in its ordinariness. This was not a marked heritage site. It's just one of those things. It's not on any trail. I'll probably never be able to find it again. But it just reminded me of what we've already been sharing and hearing about here this morning, that we live in a civilization thousands of years old. And of course, what happened in Cuyamaca, what happened in this whole country is the conquest, and then come the cattle. And we've been living on a beef diet, many of us, ever since. And of course, cattle are an environmental disaster. They completely alter the environment, both botanically and zoologically. And that really was a big devastation to the lifestyle of the Kumeyaay. And that, it was called Rancho Cuyamaca State Park. It was a cattle ranch. It was a Spanish land holding. And now it's something else. Now the Kumeyaay didn't go anywhere, obviously. But those ancient centuries and centuries and centuries long villages are no longer there. And it humbles you, and it reminds me that our village, my suburban neighborhood, every time I see the coyotes go by behind my house, there are modern coyote bones that go back 40 million years. So when you see a coyote crossing the road, his family's been here for 40 million years. And I think my little suburban neighborhood, built in 1967, I don't think it's going to last 100 years the way my house is progressing. And so it's just fascinating to me how ephemeral our own structures, our own buildings, our own language are. And when you encounter the previous inhabitants of this land, it just roots you in the impermanence and how that feels. And I was just overcome with so many feelings as I sat out there. And I wanted to sort of sort through those with you today. So, I just want to invite you into an inquiry with me about what acknowledging impermanence kind of does to you. Because initially, the loss of something, the death of something, naturally triggers grief and regret and maybe even remorse or maybe even guilt. I don't know, a whole cluster of things. But I want to kind of get past that. Let's start here, that the Buddha, who lived in India 25 centuries ago, he began his teaching after his enlightenment around the age of 35 or so. He started teaching, and Buddha traveled all through India and taught for 50 years, really. Quite a different story than the story of Jesus, who was baptized by John the Baptist and was dead 2.5 years later. So Buddha had a 50-year run as a teacher. And the first thing he taught was the idea of impermanence. He taught the Four Noble Truths, and he taught the 3 marks of existence. So out of his enlightened consciousness, as he looks out at reality, these are the 3 marks or qualities of reality. I won't do the second and third, but I'll do the first. The first is Anitya. It just means impermanence, that all forms arise and all forms fade. And you might think, That's so obvious. Why do we need to be taught that? Well, we need to be reminded of it, certainly. And this is where all Buddhist wisdom and practice begins. Everything that was to follow had to begin with this acknowledgement of impermanence. Now, what does he mean when he says that all forms are impermanent? What is a form? Well, a form is a thing that has come together out of the aggregate elements around. So thoughts are forms, feelings are forms, opinions are forms, religions are forms, ideologies are forms, nations are forms, entire civilizations are forms. This beautiful planet, planet Earth, is a form that has not always existed. It came into being at some point and it will go out of being at some point. This beautiful, beautiful Earth has not always been here, nor will it be here forever. And to learn how to say yes to that. Yes, to work for us for its sustenance and its sustainability, we want to prevent an early, untimely death, but we cannot prevent the cosmos from doing what the cosmos is going to do. Long after our lifetimes, I'm sure. So even when the Buddha lay dying at the age of 80, he said to his monks, there are different reports about this. There's some reports that say his dying words were, remember this, that all forms are impermanent. And I'm struck by that because he's talking to a bunch of monks that have been with him for decades. I'm sure they heard that every day. I'm sure they walked in the embodiment of the wisdom of impermanence. But before he died, he's like, I got to say this one more time because I know they're going to forget. Because it's so easy for us to not really accept impermanence. Even the most devoted disciples around him had to be reminded one last time. So that gets me thinking, why is this so difficult to accept? Why do we resist it so, the awareness of impermanence? Perhaps if we stopped viewing impermanence as a problem to be solved, or as an enemy to be conquered, we might more readily be able to see its gifts. So as usual, in any kind of pursuit of wisdom, the change doesn't have to happen out here. The change has to happen in here. Making peace with impermanence drives us deeper into the realization of interconnectedness. So now I want to think about 3 gifts that I think impermanence is trying to give us, that we have been resisting until now. That when we finally say yes and relax and surrender and accept the fact of impermanence, it drives us deeper into the realization of interconnectedness. So that's where I want to pause for a moment as I think the first gift. So we know that none of this is going to last forever. And when we truly embody the wisdom that none of us owns anything really, that we have to let go of all of it, sometimes suddenly without any warning. When we know this, when we say yes to this, when we embody this, we open our grasp, we let go, and we receive everything. And we see through the illusion of ownership and possession. I remember being with my mom when she died, and she was 86. And she lived up in Ventura. Her husband, my father, had passed away 2.5 years earlier. And my mom was really vibrant and alive right up to the end. She didn't have a long, slow fade. She just felt lousy one day and drove herself to the hospital. And 8 days later, she was gone. You know, they checked her in and we all got phone calls and there was multiple organ failure. They If she'd been younger, the physicians might have done some exploratory surgery, probably pancreatic cancer. We don't really know, because to even diagnose that, you got to dig in. And what's the point? So we opted for palliative care and bringing her home. And we rented a hospital bed, moved the furniture out of the living room, put it right in the living room, brought her home, got a 24-hour nurse. And she was only with us a few more days after that. We gathered around. There she was with all of her art and her beautiful garden out through the window, and her Toyota Camry in the garage. And me and my two brothers and our wives and the kids and a bunch of grandkids. It was a good death. And this amazing nurse that just slept on the couch and spent 24 hours a day with her and kept the morphine coming. And my mom was sort of in and out of consciousness. And then when she finally passed, it's like at that moment, it just really hit me that her house, all of her father's hand-carved furniture, her beautiful home, the Toyota Camry in the garage, all of that stuff instantly belonged to me and Eric and John. I know we've heard that cliche our whole life, you can't take it with you. But until you've been in the room when that has happened, you don't believe it. You think you own your house, your guitars, my wife, my dog, my house, the lie of all of those sentences. You just don't buy it. But what if right now here, not on our deathbed, what if we could here embody the consciousness of impermanence? My mom just let it all go. I mean, what choice did she have? And that's the surrender that might just be a gift for us to cultivate that now. We know that we are only sharing this world. I don't own a stitch of it. I get to participate in it. And I get to participate with everyone and with everything. That's what I mean by impermanence driving us into the consciousness of interconnectedness. And I am no different than those Kumeyaay families thousands of years ago living in the woodlands of the Laguna Mountains, walking along the San Diego River to their summer homes at La Jolla Cove. They have been driven out of their original homes. They live in their ancestral summer homes, but they don't get to live in La Jolla anymore, do they? There's no good trout fishing coming out of the San Diego River. All the lobsters have been picked clean out of the tide pools. We changed the world. And walking along their ancient paths, I'm reminded that someday, 1,000 years from now, others will be remembering us with similar melancholy. So when we make peace with impermanence, the boundaries between our lives and their lives become diaphanous, porous, and ultimately non-existent. There is no longer us and them, there is only us. And when we accept this gift of interconnectedness, we are given a second gift. We feel the stranglehold of our egotism, our selfishness lessening. We no longer think so much just about ourselves. You know, Confucius, the great Chinese philosopher, said that the inferior person asks, "What's in it for me?" And the superior person asks, "What is the right thing to do?" And I've been both of those people in the same moment sometimes. But as we slip further and further into the acceptance of impermanence and the realization of interconnectedness, we grow more and more disinterested in our previous selfish obsessions. Now we think more in terms of not what do I get out of it, but what is my duty to the whole? In Sanskrit, we call it dharma. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna teaches Arjuna about his dharma, sometimes translated as duty, but much bigger than that. You know, dharma is the place where your capabilities meet the needs of the world. It's where each of us as a unique presence has the capacity to participate in the sustenance of the universe that sustains us. It's about reciprocity. Just as I do not make the air that I breathe, the water that I drink, I didn't build much of anything. I just get up in the morning, put on my pants, drink some coffee, and try to be useful. Where can I be useful? You know, the Hebrew phrase, tikkun olam, out of the Kabbalah tradition of Judaism, the idea that each of us has a moral duty to participate in the healing of the world, tikkun olam. Everywhere we look, we see woundedness and need, and to not be overwhelmed by that, but to figure out, how can I clean up this one little corner a little bit better to be the change that I want to see in the world, and all of that stuff. That's the fruit of the reduction of egocentrism or egotism. When egotism shrinks down to its right size, we are given then a third gift, finally. As our spiritual perception and awareness begin to sharpen, allowing egotism to slough off the way a snake sloughs off its skin cleanses the windows of perception, cleanses the windows of eternity. We begin to see the world differently now. As the great English poet and mystic William Blake wrote, if the doors of perception were cleansed, man would see things as they really are, infinite. And that line from hundreds and hundreds of years ago made a big impact on Jim Morrison when he was walking down the beach at Venice Beach with his friend, and they were about to start a band. And Jim Morrison was reading a lot of William Blake. And he also was aware of Aldous Huxley's little book called The Door of Perception. Aldous Huxley, in the 1930s and 40s, sat in a backyard in Los Angeles, took mescaline, and wrote a beautiful essay about it. Now there's all this talk, right, about the use of these psychotropic substances, ayahuasca and psilocybin and all the rest. So Aldous Huxley is kind of a pioneer in that field as well. And in his efforts to describe his own psychedelic experience, he went back to that William Blake line and called his essay The Doors of Perception. And Jim Morrison decided to call his band The Doors. And that idea that when we experience impermanence and we deepen into interconnectedness, and when we slough off our selfish egotism, we cleanse the lenses with which we view reality, and we begin to perceive infinity. Paul writes about this in his second letter to the Corinthians. You know, we see but through a glass darkly. Our perception is limited. The Hindus call this Maya. Maya is that veil that hides from us the oneness that we are. And so we live here in Maya, which is illusion, fragmentation, alienation, loneliness, disconnection. So what if impermanence and change is trying to give us the gifts that, like a ring full of keys that will unlock the doors of perception, so that we no longer feel wrongly that we are separate, alienated, and alone? What if all of these gifts could begin with the simple acceptance of impermanence? So if impermanence can open us in these ways, then perhaps impermanence is not a problem to be solved by buying some more products, or an enemy to be controlled and conquered. Perhaps impermanence is our greatest teacher. So I want to close with a poem from Mary Oliver. We've already heard some beautiful poetry this morning, and I just can't resist going on. And there might even be some more, but this is a poem from Mary Oliver from her collection called 1,000 Mornings. And this poem is called Lines Written in the Growing Days of Darkness. Every year we have been witness to it, how the world descends into a rich mash in order that it may resume. And therefore, who would cry out to the petals on the ground to stay? knowing as we must how the vivacity of what was is married to the vitality of what will be. I don't say it's easy, but what else will do if the love one claims to have for the world be true? So let us go on cheerfully enough this and every crisping day, though the sun be swinging east and the ponds be cold and black, and the sweets of the year be doomed. Namaste. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. That's very powerful. Took lots of notes. Okay, now we're going to sing. So, and maybe everybody needs to stand if they're willing and able for hymn number 359, When We Are Gathered. This is one of those funny hymns where you think it's going to go up and it goes down. So pay attention.
I think I'll play it through once first.
Okay. It's in the gray hymnal, 359. Nice last line. Okay, where are we? Closing words. And the extinguishing of the chalice. So maybe you want to extinguish the chalice and I'll sing the closing words. There's a little doodad there. Okay. As we close our service by extinguishing the chalice, we invite you to stay afterwards for a time of community gathering. That's okay. I'm sure we'll figure it out. Margot Mariana is going to read a poem by Mary Oliver. Also wanted to mention that after we sing the closing circle song, we'll have our discussion. So if you want to visit, like we'd like to do, maybe you go outside, and then those of us who want to continue with the discussion can begin while the people are still on Zoom. Okay, thanks. Margot.
Can tell how much we love Mary Oliver. I think people who are afraid of poetry suddenly understand they don't need to be. This is very also beautiful theme for today. Mindful. Every day I see or I hear something more or less that kills me with delight, that leaves me like a needle in a haystack of light. It is what I was born for, to look, to listen,
to lose myself inside the soft world, to instruct myself over and over in joy and acclamation. For I am talking about the exceptional, the fearful, the dreadful, the very extravagant, but of the ordinary, the common, that very drab. O daily presentations, O good scholar, I say to myself, how can you help? But grow wise with each teaching in these, the untrimmable light of the world, the oceans shine, the prayers that you are made of out of grass.
All right. Closing circle song, if you can rise and take hands, if you're willing and or able. Or something like this. I guess, okay. Okay, so we're going to have our circle discussion. And I guess Peter will kind of monitor that or whatever. Okay.
Yeah, I just